Alright guys, Willem here back with a new video. In this video, I'm wrapping up my series on the international seasons of The Amazing Race, where I've already done season rankings of Amazing Race Canada, Australia, and Asia, and here we'll be wrapping up by talking about my thoughts on the last English language series of The Amazing Race, and that being The Amazing Race China Rush, which is a really bizarre series here. Partially in the fact that it's not even entirely English language, though for the parts that aren't, it does have English subtitles, but it is a series of The Amazing Race that takes place entirely in the country of China. And initially in the first season, it was comprised of entirely foreigners, but eventually that transitioned to including some Chinese teams, which is really just a weird concept, especially because the funny thing of all this is the fact that the prize for this season is a trip around the world, which essentially means the prize for the season is what you would just normally get for being on The Amazing Race. That's something that's really funny to me. Also, we have the return of Alan Wu, who's the host of Amazing Race Asia, comes back to do China Rush here, which again, I like Alan Wu, so I was happy to see that. But still, as a whole, really bizarre series of the show. But I still want to talk about my thoughts on each individual season, where again, it's only 3 seasons. It's not really worth ranking them. Instead, we'll be running through season chronological order, talking about my thoughts about them along the way. And with that, let's start off with season 1, which to me is the best season of the bunch. To me, this is the season that has the most likable cast. I think it's a cast of really compelling teams here. I think you got the likes of Sean and Amy, who are this really fun villainesque team. You have Charlie and Rachel, the eventual winners of the season, who essentially felt like a Flo and Zach light, and them being these what are dubbed as flirtatious friends, whatever that means. But they had some bickering, again, not as much as Flo. Again, Rachel's not as fun as Flo, but again, no one is. So again, I thought they were still a fun team. The first boots here, and Paul and Francis were a really likable team. You had team like Bonnie and Mel, who were fun for these older women. You had Lisa and Karen, who maybe not be the most riveting TV in the world, but did have a fun villain edit as well, of them using the yields and U-turns to take out people. I thought for the most part, this is a very likable cast. And really, this first season here ends up having a very international cast, with teams from around the world racing around China, which to me is a concept that I think gets lost moving forward. Where I think something so great about this first season is that it feels like it's these group of foreigners having to navigate their way through China, a country they're not as familiar with. While I think moving forward with the inclusion of Chinese teams, it kind of takes away that aspect. That to me makes it a lot less interesting. Now, I will say that something that is kind of weird about the season is that the results are mostly stilted for a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of the same teams winning legs, with Rick and Josh and Charlie and Rachel winning the majority of the legs on this season. Overall, I do really like season 1. I do think it's the best season of the bunch, with it being a pretty consistent season through and through. For me, in comparison to something like Amazing Race Asia, I think it's kind of in line with my thoughts on seasons 2 and 4. Or again, seasons with a really fun cast. I think it's probably a step below them, where even though Charlie and Rachel are a really fun winning team, and I really like the likes of Sean and Amy, for me, I feel like those Asia seasons still stand out as a bit more notable to me. But again, I still think this is a pretty solid season of the show. I think in the grand scheme of things, middling, kind of middle of the road. But again, I think in comparison to these seasons taking place in Asia, I do think it is one of the better ones. With that, let's transition to season 2, which again is where the show kind of went away from that initial theme of the first season, where while it does have an international cast still, with some teams coming from outside of China and them not speaking Chinese and speaking in English throughout the entirety of it, we also get Chinese teams along the way, with those Chinese teams speaking in Chinese, and through that we get English subtitles, and we do also see Alan Wu speaking in both English and Chinese. And I just feel like it's kind of weird. I mean, to me, again, obviously as an English speaker, I just felt like it was hard to connect to a lot of the Chinese teams. And I think some of that comes from the concept of this being a mixed season, where I think if this had been just entirely comprised of Chinese teams speaking in Chinese, I feel like it would have been on a lot more even of a playing field, where at that point everyone is speaking a foreign language to me, and through that I would be able to connect with the cast a bit more consistently. But because of this language barrier here, where half the cast speaks in English, again, obviously my known language, and then the other half speaking in a different language, it kind of made it harder to connect to the Chinese teams over the international teams. Though I will say that there are some teams that overcome that, the likes of Soonbin and Hao Fuer were really, really fun team there for really fun energy. I thought Mary and Cecilia were a fun team as well. The Wushu instructors were also really fun, but I still felt like the barrier to entry of those teams were much larger than those that I would be able to understand right away. Now, as a whole, I think season 2 of China Rush here is good. I think it is another season kind of in line with season 1. I would say like slightly below it, though it's kind of in the same ballpark. I think it is still a very solid season. Again, I didn't like this change of adding in these Chinese teams, but again, like considering this was a show obviously aired in China and meant to be for the Chinese audience, like obviously it makes sense why they would do so. But again, I still thought there were pretty notable teams throughout it. I thought the likes of Rhett and Howie were a fun team there. I thought Matt and Kylie are probably one of my favorite teams in all of The Amazing Race China Rush here. Simon and Catherine are a pretty humorous team that despite them being very mediocre throughout the entire race, they somehow get second place. But I mean, like, as a whole, this is mostly baseline season. Again, like, I think in comparison to Asia, it's around where I would have, like, season 5. Again, kind of middle of the road. There are some notable eliminations here, like Paula Nash being first boots was a big surprise to me. The Wushu instructors being eliminated relatively early on was a really big surprise after having a really strong start. We have Summer and Achan who have to quit the race due to one of their grandpas having cancer, and that's a depressing scene. I will say that Lily and John, who are the winners of the season, are a mostly forgettable team in my eyes, to where they're fine, but I just blend in with some of these other dating couples that end up winning the race that really, again, like not a super memorable team for me in the grand scheme of things. But again, for the most part, I do like China Rush 2. I think it is a pretty solid season. And sadly, that transitions us to season 3, which is the final season of the bunch, the final season of International Amazing Race that I have to talk about. And it sucks to say that this is probably my least favorite season of them all. I was, again, like, I did not like China Rush 3. Part of this might come from the fact that I did get burnt out by this point. Obviously, I watched all these international seasons all in a row, so I watched Canada all the way through, Australia all the way through, Asia all the way through, and then China Rush at the very end. And to even go along with that, at the same time that I was watching these, Amazing Race Canada 8 and Australia 6 were going on. You had 34 going on. It's like, there was a lot of Amazing Race in my life at this point, to where I really did get burnt out by the time of China Rush 3. However, doesn't change the fact that I just simply did not like this season. I mean, again, like, I just came off of seasons 1 and 2. Both I thought were solid seasons of reality television. And it come to season 3 is one of the worst seasons of Amazing Race I've ever watched in my eyes. I mean, I think coming out of this watch through here, I think I have very similar opinions to this that I do with season 1 of Asia, which was another one of the seasons that I thought was one of the worst seasons I've ever watched. And I think China Rush 3 here is even worse. Like, to me, China Rush 3 here has almost nothing of note about it. And it is a mostly boring slog of a season the entire way through to me. I really did not care about any of these teams. And again, it continues on with the previous season of having essentially like a half international cast, half Chinese cast. But unlike season 2, where again, like, I felt like I could connect to a couple teams that were from China while also connecting to the international people, I really didn't connect with anybody here. I really did not care about this cast at all. Like, really, from the intros, the only team that really stood out to me was Rob and Gia, who end up being the first boots eliminated at the very first challenge, which, again, why are we bringing back this twist? Terrible twist for the show. I thought Henry and Jennifer were kind of a humorous team, kind of being in the same light as like a Simon and Catherine, of being this bumbling team that kind of skates on through, but they even get eliminated midway through. You had the likes of Ryan and Charlie, who I think were supposed to be these like villainous figures for show, but like really just came off as boring to me. I really did not connect with any of the Chinese teams on this season. I really could not tell you a single thing about most of them. It's like, I know nothing about the likes of like Christine and Steven, or Zhao Bing and Zhao Bang, and even the winners in Liu Weiwei and Lei Shang. Like, I know very little about them. Again, they were a pretty consistent team. They won like half the legs on the season, though. I mean, they also struggled in legs that they didn't win, but still, I'm like, they are a pretty solid winning team here, but I feel like I know nothing about them as people. Even Zhang Yeling and Yi Yang, who were like the 4th place team on the season, the only thing that stands out to me from them is this like one little moment of him singing to her while playing guitar during one of the roadblocks. And Kaixing and Kaishang have an interesting downfall where they arrive in first but get an hour penalty and end up being eliminated by the end of it, which also is kind of ridiculous that like all the teams arrive within like 13 minutes of each other for that leg. But Xiaobing and Bang also get eliminated in a similar like with a 30-minute penalty and get eliminated despite coming in second. Like those are really, to me, like probably the most notable moments of the season. That along with the Robin Giagiavu. It's like really, again, a completely uneventful season for me through and through. I really just did not care about the majority of the season. Found myself bored, really wanted to be over with. And because that, it is easily my least favorite season of China Rush. And I think it's a debate between this and Asia 1 for my least favorite season that I watched through the process of watching all these international seasons. But there we go. I mean, those are my thoughts on the Amazing Race China Rush. Again, wrapping up this series on all the international Amazing Race seasons, which that's done. Now moving forward, again, I'm still not like 100% on what exactly I'm going to do with Amazing Race videos in the future. I mean, like obviously a video that would have been cool to make would be this like global Amazing Race season ranking. But I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of work. And also it's like I'm not as familiar with certain seasons of US at this point to where I would need to rewatch those. And to be honest, I'm not really 100% willing to commit to that, but it would be an interesting video for down the road. I will say I wouldn't mind doing like a top 10 team video for like these series of like Canada and Australia. I think that could be a fun topic. Maybe a global top 10 teams of all time. That could be fun too. Like I do think there are certain other videos that I would like to do pertaining these international seasons of Amazing Race. But again, not going to 100% solidify on those coming anytime soon. But again, like this was a big journey for me. I mean, it took me over 3 months to watch all these international seasons of the Amazing Race, and now I'm finally concluding this series of videos here. So again, hopefully I'll do more Amazing Race content down the road. Won't really commit to that, but you can still expect the same type of content from this channel, especially in terms of the likes of Survivor and Big Brother videos moving forward. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.